I didn't know I suffered from vertigo, but gosh, we're at the top.
Yeah, it's a great view from up here, looking out across the town of Folkestone, the modern town. I mean, most of this was not town in the Middle Ages, or even actually in the early 20th century. A lot of this was still being fields. The historic town, the medieval town, with its origins around the minster of St Eanswyth, is on the west cliff overlooking what is now the harbour and overlooking the mouth of the Pent stream. And you can see the tower of the church just on the coast over there. That is the point, or just near that, at the Bale, that this watercourse, this 12th century watercourse, delivered fresh drinking water. So it took it from the site of the Channel Tunnel terminal just below the downs from this stream. It was diverted on Moorhall Wreck, which is just below us, into this artificial channel, and then that artificial channel ran from there all the way across the Folkestone Plain to the site of the Bale and the Bale Pond. And that was for hundreds of years the main source of fresh drinking water for the town and people of Folkestone.
And we're talking about a distance of a mile and a half.
I think it's about a mile and a half. It's a huge piece of engineering. I mean, it took us a week to dig our trench, a small trench, across the site of it on Moorhall Wreck and investigate it and everything. But it's hard digging. You're often digging through clay. The amount of labour involved is just incredible. That to dig, of course, and of course it's got to be precisely surveyed. If they get it wrong, it won't work. It has to follow the contours so that water is just gently delivered to the point they want on the Bale.
So
really clever stuff.
Chalk aquifers, but you've also got the clay soil.
Yeah, I mean the chalk, we're standing on the chalk of the North Downs, but below us the geology is mainly gault clay. They're taking the water that rises in this stream, diverting the stream, and then dig this artificial channel which they lined with clay. So it's just an open ditch to start with. By the 19th century it was in pipes for much of its course. But originally it was an open ditch, and that brought huge challenges over the years because they had to keep it open, they had to stop animals getting into it, they had to stop it being damaged and blocked. And so the borough of Folkestone used to employ people they called water leaders whose job was to keep it clear, maintain it, keep animals out of it. And there's all sorts of court cases and town records, municipal records that deal with all the problems they had with it over the centuries. It was a major civic achievement to keep it going.
Beverley, I want to talk about that a little more. Civic pride and water. But first of all, what are we looking at? It's spectacular, isn't it?
It really is. We've got the whole of Folkestone laid out before us, and then beautiful coast and the sea with the sunshine on it today. And actually just to the right of that big white building there, you can see our main office here at Folkestone. So we're still very, very close to that original site, and lots of our people live and work in this area. We're very connected. We have our friends and family here, so it's very meaningful to us.
And the civic pride Andrew referred to, you had water inspectors, but often if mergers were proposed, then people would challenge those mergers. I think the railway companies did at one point. People were threatened by what was going on with the changing of water and who was in charge of it, which borough. So there were acts of parliament and decrees as to what could and couldn't happen.
Absolutely. You had to get a new act originally to start any small water companies, and there were thousands of them. It was very much run on a town by town basis, and then over time driven really by the needs of the population, the need to be more resilient, and the realisation that you needed to get economy of scale in there as well. These small companies merged together into rural districts. We see the result of that today, really. If you look back among any of the water companies in existence now, you'll find that originally they were tiny companies that over time came together in their area and now supply across the UK.
And there's some nice photographs of the opening of one Victorian reservoir. Just tell us what they show, the mayor and civic pride. He held a banquet.
He did. Well, that was in Dover. Yes, they held a banquet in the reservoir. So they had the chairs and tables and the amazing brick art ceiling of the reservoir. And there's a picture of that. Actually, we put together a 150-year celebratory kind of leaflet at the time, back in '98. And there's a picture of that in there. Quite incredible.
So civic pride and water going hand in hand. And do you think, we don't want to be preachy, but do you think that perhaps we've just all taken a fresh water supply for granted? And when we turn on our taps and when we have a bath, we don't appreciate the amount of water that we're using?
Absolutely. It's really easy now, and it should be. You know, it's a really important aspect for public health. Reason why we can all live, you know, such healthy and long lives in the main is because of sanitation and fresh water, absolutely critical to our lives now. But I think we don't see enough of that infrastructure. It is under the ground. We haven't got open ditches. We don't have to keep cows out of there. We do have to do a lot of maintenance on our assets, of course we do, and we've got a team of people that monitor that 24 hours a day, but it's invisible. We don't see it, and yet absolutely as critical.
But surely, Andrew, even back in the 7th century, Eanswyth would have known about public health and water.
Yeah, I mean, archaeologists spend quite a lot of time thinking about water, where water is, where water flows to, because that will lead us to where people lived. And archaeology is really the study of people in the past. People were much more constrained in the past about where they could live, where they could permanently settle, by the presence or absence of fresh drinking water. And really, ideally, you want to be as close to the source of the water, the spring water, as possible. So the Anglo-Saxon Royal Centre at Lyminge, a few miles from here, is situated right next to a spring, and that water therefore you can be pretty sure is going to be clean. If you're 3 miles downstream, you don't have too much control in those days about what happens between you and the spring water. Cattle, sheep, people washing their clothes in it, all sorts of things. So the further you get from the source, the more problematic it gets. That was the great achievement in 12th century Folkestone, really, in the name of Eanswyth, was the delivery of that water, relatively fresh, clean water, to where the town actually was.
Well, let's just walk. We're, as you say, up on the upper reaches of the cliffs over Folkestone, but there's a marker here, a concrete marker.
Yes.
What is that depicting and why?
That actually is a trigonometry point that was put in when they built the Channel Tunnel terminal, because they needed to actually really precisely measure levels, things like that. So, because obviously what you didn't want to do is you dug the tunnel from Folkestone towards another tunnel coming to meet it from Calais. It was quite important that they met spot on. So this was put in for that. When it was put in, an archaeological dig was done here, and that found a Neolithic Stone Age ditch with pottery in it. So we think that actually the story on this hill, Castle Hill, goes back way beyond the Middle Ages to the Stone Age.
My goodness.
You know, these hills, you can tell a story from the Ice Age right up to the Cold War from these hills. All of Britain's history is sort of present and laid out before us in the landscape around Folkestone, and the water, the natural streams, and then people's efforts to channel and divert these streams and supply water is a crucial part of those millennia of human existence on the place that we now call Folkestone.
Well, Andrew, thank you for sparing your time for this Affinity Water special podcast on the history of water. But for our concluding comment, I'll turn to Beverley just to say we've got a Jubilee weekend coming up. It's at these weekends that people go out and water the garden, get the paddling pool out for the kids, and perhaps we use more water than we should. So a few tips.
I'm not going to be the fun police, and I wouldn't tell anyone not to use a paddling pool, but I think just some small things that we can all do. Use, as you mentioned earlier, use that washing machine less. Are your clothes really dirty? Have a slightly shorter shower. Fill a paddling pool up instead of using the hose. Great idea. And then use that water to water your garden. Plants love it in the incredibly hot weather. So some really, really small changes. When you think about that across our entire customer base, not only just here in Folkestone, but across the wider Affinity area, those savings are really going to add up.
Well, Andrew, I said I'd finished with you, but I can't resist one last final question.
Yep.
Did these aged communities suffer drought?
I think they would have, yeah, battling against the climate, good years, bad years is part of the human story as well. I'm sure that would have happened here. And I certainly remember growing up in Cheriton, the 1977, I think it was, drought. 76 was it? Yeah, 76, which was standpipes in the streets and all sorts of things like that. So that's, yeah, but it happens.
But we are, as you say, on a remarkable site today, overlooking Folkestone, the traffic, the railways. We can see the channel crossing, but this history is so important to us, isn't it? And it must be preserved.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about Folkestone is the modern world is very much in evidence with the Channel Tunnel and the motorway, but the past is here as well, and we can preserve and celebrate that past at the same time as enjoying a modern existence with all the comforts that brings.
Well, Andrew and Beverley, thank you very much indeed for talking to the Affinity Water podcast series today, looking at the history of water in Folkestone. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.